CEO and Chairman, Scott Rechler, is our guest speaker. Scott is one of the most thoughtful and inspirational figures in our business, and quite frankly, the city. I am extremely proud to work for him and RXR. With that said, I feel very fortunate and grateful to be back in the office that is safe and welcoming. It has been incredibly rewarding to be back with my colleagues and friends where we can physically be with each other to collaborate, mentor, and share ideas with. The bottom line is this: you can't get the same experience by working from home. Now, these are certainly unsettling and challenging times, but nonetheless, with Thanksgiving around the corner, it's the time of year to reflect, put things in perspective, and share the things that you are grateful for. I just shared one with all of you. I am also grateful for my family, my loving wife, and 2 beautiful children. I also recognize that my children have all 4 grandparents that they get to see. We live in a safe community and live in a caring and affectionate home. I don't take this for granted, and I consider myself to be very lucky. Cherish the good things in life and be vocal about them. Share them with loved ones and friends, especially during this time of year. It's not a time to be shy and quiet. Be emotional, be loving, be affectionate. Don't make the hard times harder than they have to be. Finally, I leave you with this. Be patient, but active. During these uncertain times, as we move forward, be active at a high level, both physically and emotionally, both at work and at home. It's not the time to be complacent. It's a time to be steadfast and optimistic. We will get through this together. I wish everyone a healthy and happy Thanksgiving and holiday season. Thank you.
Thank you. Very well said, I agree. Now we would like to recognize the former chairman in the Zoom room today. So please rise when your name is called and imagine a stadium full of applause. Earl Altman, Pete Coburn, Dennis Carr, Leslie Harwood, Nikki Hurriet, David Coppell, Greg Shanker, Bill Montana, Rob Fink, Andrew Ackerman, Jonathan Tutel, Lindsay Ornstein, and Lenny Lazzarino. Thanks to all the former chairmen for being here. Quick reminder about board elections. Everyone should expect ballots both by mail and electronically next week. Voting will conclude on Monday, November 30th. It may be too soon to get into this, but ballots must be postmarked by November 30th or emailed to me by midnight on November 30th. So please take time to vote for the board of 2021. Also a reminder that our December luncheon is members only luncheon. Members will have the opportunity to network with other members, so please register and be prepared to show your face on Zoom, as we'll be doing a lot of networking, or in limited capacity if the fates allow us to meet in person. Now to James Nelson, who's going to announce this year's scholarship winner.
Thanks, Laura. We're pleased to announce that Heather Beanstalk is our recipient of our WREA scholarship for this year. It was a very competitive field. We had over a dozen applicants, but Heather did an incredible job. She is majoring at real estate at NYU. She has an impressive 3.88 GPA. She's currently interning at Corcoran. She embodies WREA with her charitable efforts in that she has done work for the B+ organization for cancer treatment. And she's also been involved in several mission trips down to Haiti. But above and beyond, her essay blew us away on the impact of COVID to CRE. So congratulations to Heather, who's watching this now, and all of our applicants. It was a very tough decision for us this year. So, but congratulations. So we'll give a applause. Also wanted to let you know that we will be having a special event for our mentors and mentees for our year-long mentorship program on December 10th. And thank you to RXR, who are going to be hosting us at the Super Pier. So we're going to have 2 small groups on Thursday afternoon. We're going to offer it first to our mentors and mentees who've been participating this year. But if we have any extra spots, we'll certainly let you know. And lastly, keep an eye out for another continuing ed program for December. We had a very successful one before on office leasing. This one will be on multifamily, where our own Rob Shapiro and Shalini Mehra will be on the panel, and other speakers to be announced. Thank you.
Thanks, James. And Caroline, over to you for an update on events.
Thanks, Laura. So a couple really great events that have happened the past few weeks. Last Friday, we had an in-person fitness class at Rumble at Catch, Steak, and Meat Packing. It was really awesome to see some of you in person, and we'll continue to plan more fitness events, hopefully in person when we can. Also, this past Saturday, we partnered with Rebuilding Together NYC and had a group that helped put together our Clean Up a Community Garden in Bushwick. It was a really special day and we got a lot of work done, and it was absolutely a beautiful weekend. So thank you for everyone who's able to attend that. In terms of upcoming events, if everyone's free at 5 p.m. tonight, we have a workout class with Joseph D via Zoom. I did this class when we did it with him last time. It is such a good class. This guy's full of energy and it's a really great workout, so highly recommend you join. And then on Wednesday night at 6 p.m. again, another Zoom event. We're having a virtual poker tournament that's being hosted by our 2019 new member class, and all the money raised through the tournament will be sent to Operation Backpack, one of our favorite community groups. So please join that if you can as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Caroline. All right, now without further ado, let's get to our speaker. If you have any questions, you can enter them in the Q&A section of the chat. So I'd like to announce Scott Rechler. Scott Rechler is the Chief Executive Officer and Chairman of RXR, one of the largest owners, managers, and developers of real estate and infrastructure in the New York metropolitan region. With an aggregate gross asset value of approximately $20.5 billion, comprising approximately 25.5 million square feet of commercial property and multifamily portfolio of approximately 6,000 units, RXR seeks to build and create stronger communities within its buildings and within the area it operates. As Chairman and CEO, Scott believes that RXR's success is inextricably linked to the health and vitality of the broader community. As an appointee of New York Governor Andrew Cuomo from 2011 to 2016, Scott served on the Board of Commissioners as Vice Chairman for the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey. He later served at the request of Governor Cuomo on the Board of New York MTA from 2017 to 2019. In addition to his role at RXR, Scott currently serves as Chair of the Regional Plan Association, Trustee and Vice Chair of the National September 11th Memorial and Museum at the World Trade Center, a member of REBNY, a board member of the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research, and member of the NYU Real Estate Institute Advisory Committee. Scott also serves on the board of the Tribeca Film Institute, where he serves as its co-chair, and also serves on the board of the Drum Major Institute, Convene, Kitchen United, and the Center for Social Innovation, and the Hospital for Special Surgery. Impressive, Scott.
A lot of stuff.
Wow. Please join me in welcoming Scott Rechler.
It's great to be here. We've had my luncheons where I've had the opportunity to speak a number of times, I've always enjoyed those luncheons physically. This is actually our virtual physical shot, and I appreciate everyone's patience as we've tried to figure out the logistics of how to make this physical on our side. But I'll miss at this event having the opportunity after the lunch or before the lunch getting to network with all of the people that are there, because I always find that to be one of the more informative and interesting parts of the luncheon. So hopefully I'll be invited back hopefully next year when we can have luncheons like that, and I can physically engage with everyone and be part of it. So
for sure, I think we can all agree that we miss being at the University Club, and I imagine everyone sitting at home right now eating their chicken luncheon as though they were at the University Club.
Ryan, with that, why don't you pin us so we can see us, so we can make sure we can see this through.
Okay. So first of all, I want to thank you for your continuous support of WREA. I know you've been a great supporter over the years. Ryan Lee has been our secretary on the board this year, and just really been doing a fantastic job. And we both share our passion for Operation Backpack, which I know RXR gives back to. So I wanted to say a big thank you for that.
My pleasure.
I read recently that RXR won an award for the best COVID technology, the RXWell. Can you give us some insight on that and just tell us what RXR is working on in the COVID area now?
Sure. Well, first again, I appreciate what WREA does for our industry, and it's important, really, particularly at times like this, where there's a lot going on and really a dynamic and fluid time, to have leadership organizations like that. So thank you all, and Andy, thank you for, I think, the great opening and words of thankfulness, because I think it's interesting coming off of, and I'll pivot back to your question in a second, but coming off of the election and into Veterans Day and Thanksgiving, and particularly with this election, where there was so much anxiety about how people were going to react what was going to happen at the polls, what was going to happen on the streets, what was going to happen, post-election. And I think as you look back, we should be proud of being Americans in terms of the amount of people that came out to work the polls, how people stood online to go vote at record levels, how we didn't have some of the challenges and demonstrations that got out of hand on our streets that people had anticipated. I mean, if you look at New York, all of our storefronts being boarded up pre-election. So you look at that, you say, wow, that's really great citizenry. And then going into Veterans Day, and again, the ability to appreciate our fellow citizens that stand up for the safety of our nation, so we can have this freedom, is extraordinary. And then Thanksgiving, where we can all then be thankful for what we have as a community and larger. So it's, I think, an important time of year, and I feel good, really good about how November has kicked off relative to that sense of community. So going back to RXR, I think what we saw coming into COVID more broadly was the way that people use space was changing, and we began to think about how do we use both our physical space and our digital capabilities to better understand the use of space, to create more personalized experiences for our customers, to have transparency as to who's using certain amenities, capacity levels, better use AI to manage our buildings and our building systems for environmental sustainability. And then COVID hit, and while we were in the middle of this, and we said, let's take the lessons that we learned and some of the strategies that we were pursuing on actually how to make our buildings more optimized for a pre-COVID world, and focus all of that technology on how do we bring people back to the workplace safely, so they feel safe, so that they have tools that enable them to come back and have a coexist within the work environment and get the most out of the work environment with their colleagues, but in a responsible and safe way. Measure whether there's compliance on face mask wearing, on social distancing, and then also have transparency of the safety and wellness of the building and of your space and your colleagues. And so that's something we kicked off literally March 15th, starting to plan about how to actually build this out, both in terms of physical adjustments and the implementation of technology to help do this. And we were down the road already working with Microsoft. So Microsoft joined us as a partner, as well as McKinsey. So we had about 100 people literally working day in and night on trying to get ourselves ready for what we call the March to Memorial Day, which was when we're going to have the system prototyped here and in our building in Long Island, and then by Labor Day rolled out through all of our buildings, which we've done. And I think, as Andy said in his description of coming back to work, it enables us to come back and feel normal, even though we're living through this abnormal time. And it brings people back in the workplace, where not only that we feel safe, but frankly, our spouses, our parents, our other loved ones who had so much anxiety because we've been staying home for so long, felt safe that for us that we were coming back to a workplace that we put so much effort in to making sure it was an environment that they were going to be able to coexist, but not take extra risk along that way. And as part of this, we know we got to be nimble. And as the world changes, we continually change, and we learn, and we're watching very carefully what's happening with the infection rates in our areas, et cetera, and then rolling out other products. So we rolled out a few weeks ago a new program, a testing program, because I think if you think about the pieces of what we've created, so we have transparency, we have behavioral changes, we have ability to monitor compliance, but really sort of the last piece that we really didn't have was testing. And as we spoke to our tenants, that was an area where they thought would give people the greatest sense of insurance, because when you look at the COVID-19, one of the biggest challenges is that it's 4 out of the 10 cases are asymptomatic. So you don't even know that someone actually is a carrier who's contagious. And so it's this invisible virus that if you could make visible, everyone would feel better. So we teamed up with Northwell Health and worked with them, again, with Microsoft and our teams there, to develop a testing protocol that's based on data and science. So it's not arbitrary when people get tested, because one of the challenges is we could test today and then tomorrow you can go out and catch COVID, and then Next thing you know, you may be a carrier, right? Or I could be a carrier. So how do you do this with data and science? And we developed a program that set up a ability where someone gets tested every 2 weeks, every week, or every third day, depending on the risk that they may have been exposed to COVID, starting from where they live. And if you look at that zip code, what's happening with the infectious rate in that zip code? And if it's starting to spike, you go from 2 weeks, which is a low risk person, to let's say a 1 week, right? Or if you answer a questionnaire that you may have been, around someplace or traveling, you may go to it every 3 days. We measure the air, we may measure the wastewater, and look for signs of the virus. We look for signs of the virus when our cleaning people clean, and we measure their PPE to see if there's viral activity. So everyone gets a personalized testing protocol based on their risk, which enables us then to do a much larger amount of people at one time. The second area there's a lot of challenges to get companies to do it. We were going to do it, but our tenants was cost, right? Because tests for PCR COVID tests, which are the ones that are the most accurate, could be up to $150 per test. And so if you have a lot of employees, you have 1,000 employees, if you can do this on average once a week, that becomes prohibitive. So we worked with Northwell and a few other labs on creating pooling, where we take 5 samples and test them at the same time. So effectively, we brought down the cost, dramatically, because we're doing that joint sampling, and if one of them tests positive, all of them get tested individually in that area. So we dealt with cost, we dealt with the ability to sort of make it data and science, and then next was convenience to get it done. So we're actually doing it in people's offices. So we have someone set up in a conference room, do the swab test. It's non-invasive, so it doesn't do what they call the brain tickler, which goes up to it. So it's I would say it's maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but not really uncomfortable. But people go do it, and then you'll get a little notice on your app. If it's green, that you're negative, and if your testing protocol changes, it goes to orange as to when your next test should be, or it goes to red if you're tested positive and you can't even get access to the building. You're cut off from the building access system. So this is something now that we've been prototyping here. We're rolling it out to all of our tenants. We're having conversations with some big ones about them starting this, come after Thanksgiving. And I think that could be, assuming there's no additional sort of surge, that may be the final piece if we can really get testing going to help get people back to work. And I'll just end with, it does highlight one of the big challenges, though, right? Because why are we a real estate company having to develop a whole testing protocol and technology around that, when it really highlights that, frankly, this should have been a federal response where they should have put in place, a full-born testing program, tracing program, and been able to, get us back to where we can go coexist in a responsible, safe way without having the risks of people getting sick, but also the risk of having to shut down our economy as much as we've had to shut down our economy.
Right. And I guess yesterday Pfizer made an announcement about a potential vaccine and the success of the vaccine. Does that change your path or make you pivot in any kind of way on your
No.
plan?
I think at first it's great news, obviously, but it's news that was expected. I think that whether it was Pfizer or Moderna, there was going to be in November. Everyone pointed to was going to be when there'd be a vaccine, would have some first validation that the testing programs they were going through would ultimately yield some results. I think what was surprising was the 90% efficacy rate, although that may shift down a little to, as they go through it, because they still have a lot more people to go through the program, but still that was higher than most people had thought.
Yeah.
But the real issue is going to be the distribution of this, right? I mean, they'll ramp up production. I think they've been working through this, but to give you an example, for the Pfizer vaccine, it's got to be kept at minus 70 degrees Celsius, right? So you have to figure out how do you develop a logistics capacity to distribute this broadly at minus 70 degrees Celsius.
Right.
And then it's a 2-dose vaccine. And so you have to make sure that you get the right dose, get 1 dose, and then get the same vaccine again at the right time. So you need the infrastructure to be able to execute that. So I think always in our mind is this is really not going to be till the end of 2021 where we're going to be in a spot where we'll have enough people that have been inoculated where we can start getting back to the new normal. Albeit, I still think people are going to be wearing face masks in crowds, you know, when they go to the theater or other places that don't have ventilation and things like that. And there's going to be also people who just are worried about taking a vaccine, even you know, if it's been well documented that it's safe because it was done quickly. They don't, you know, people have memories, and you know, I remember my mom always talking when I was a kid. There were vaccines that were put out that there were birth defects, right? So people are going to be anxious about this. So, so I think that's the one part. And then I'll also say, you know, if you think about 9/11, you know, while we were able to get people comfortable that we built an infrastructure with Homeland Security and the Joint Terrorism Task Force and all the other stuff out there, it became a new way of life that we were going to coexist with the threat of terrorism. And I think there's a new way of life that we're going to have to coexist with the threat of a pandemic, whether it's COVID-19 or COVID-25. You know, it's a new world, and if you look around other parts of the world, they've learned how to ramp up, right? And so I think we're going to be much more sensitized to it going forward.
Yeah. I was wondering how you thought the recovery would be in real estate. You mentioned 9/11. So, like, how do you compare the recovery now versus 9/11, and what trajectory do you think we're going to take?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, you know, we have two things going on here, right? We have both a cyclical market downturn and we have a structural shift. And the cyclical is obviously COVID shut down the economy and, you know, put it on life support. Now we got to bring it in a, you know, self-induced coma. Now we got to bring it back out, right? And that's the cycle. And in that cycle, you know, it's unclear if that's going to be a V-shaped or an extended U-shaped cycle, but that cycle will work itself through, and some elements will accelerate faster than others, or recover faster than others. The second structural piece is COVID also was an accelerant of a lot of structural shifts in technology and the way people live and work that were taking place, but they were taking place over a slower period of time. And we, you know, in the last 10 months, we probably had 10 years worth of adoption of technology that has shifted. So in that structural shift, there's going to be winners and losers. Not that I like to say those words in that way, but winners and losers of product type in industries. And unfortunately, most of the thing is going to be within different job segments, right? And so when I look at this recovery, what I refer to it as, it's going to be a K-shaped recovery, where you'll have certain elements of the economy, certain products, certain jobs recover more like a V, but unfortunately you're going to have some that are going to recover in a meaningful amount negatively, an inverse V. And the challenge with that is that, and you think about it, you know, the technology companies or all the companies that have the ability where they can work from home, their businesses are doing okay or flourishing in some cases, but the ones that aren't are the hard working men and women that don't have that opportunity to work from home, right? That work in a restaurant, that work in a hotel or in the tourism industry or the local retailer. And they're the ones that really make up a big chunk of that, you know, 14% unemployment rate we have in New York City. So that's why, to me, I always, you know, feel so strongly that we have the civic responsibility to bring people back to the workplace, to bring people back to support the small businesses, the restaurants, safely and responsibly. But just because we have the luxury that we can work from home and still earn an income and keep our businesses running, doesn't mean that as a civic responsibility, that's what we should be doing, because it's costing other people's livelihood and their future potential.
Yeah. I know we as a board met in person last week to prepare for our luncheon, and we were trying to make decisions and they went so much faster in person. We were just like, why have we been meeting virtually? This is so much better. We're so much more effective in person. So
listen, we've seen it, and Ann said, I mean, it's been, I don't think I could have predicted the little nuances of how much like you pick up when you're back in the office and you're finishing a meeting. That's usually where it is. It's the finish of the meeting, the before the meeting, where something you didn't think about talking about that comes up, or you're walking in the hallway and something sparks where you can give a quick, you know, commentary. And then there's the whole social interaction and feeling like there's actually a beginning and an end to every day. You know, one of my colleagues said, it's not working from home, it's living at work, right? Because there's never a beginning and end when we were doing that. And I think for young professionals in particular, it's really, really challenging, right?
Yeah.
Both in terms of mentorship, upward mobility, and socially, right? How many people do you build your friendships, your bonds from the workplace or from the industry that now you're not engaging with on a regular basis? So you're missing those windows. So we gotta work hard to try to do it. Again, it's got to be done safely and responsibly, but it can be. Listen, we're doing this, right? And so we found a way to do it.
Yeah. As far as New York City mayoral race coming up, any thoughts on that in terms of candidates?
Yeah, so interesting. So we now finished the presidential election race, and we're jumping right into the mayoral race. And unfortunately, our current mayor has not done a great job leading us through this crisis. And I say that with respect, but disappointment, because I think there's some low-hanging fruit of things that could have been done that would have been valuable. Like I point to, and as part of a letter I spoke to people in his administration about lead by example. Like take a subway, go to a restaurant, indoor dining. Go to each borough and do that along the way. Bring the city workers back to the city offices, right? So they're not even working for the city offices right now, right? So there's, go to the local museums that have now opened up and bring people with you to lead by example, to show people it can be done. Hasn't been done, and that's just one example. And have a plan. There's not really a plan of how we were going to get the schools reopened in time, for example, or all these different things. And we started planning about reopening our office on March 15th, right? So you don't wait to the end. So when I think about a new mayor, I think we're going to be coming out of this in a moment of crisis for our city, and a pivotal moment with a lot of challenges ahead of us, both from a fiscal standpoint, reopening that quality of life that's been the magnet that has brought so many people to our city in a way, and also I would say in public safety and dealing with the police and making sure that they feel respected and respect, right? And it's got to be a mutual thing, which hasn't happened. And so you need a mayor, in my mind, that is, when they approach this not about parochial or ideology that drives their policy, but really about bringing the people together on practical ways that we're going to get things done. We all want the city to thrive. We know that there's challenges in inequality that are widening, as we've talked about, right? We know there's going to be challenges on the economic for small businesses. We know homelessness is a challenge. We know they're there, but bring people together to solve those problems. When this current mayor talked about, the tale of two cities when he became mayor, rather than bringing people together to solve the tale of two cities as a team, he divided it a little bit into the haves and have-nots, right? And said, I'm going to support this, but I'm not going to support that. And that's not going to be the solution. Business and civic leaders need to come together to do this. But it's going to be a challenge for any mayor that's out there. And the city council, has also got a real strong ideological extreme bent to it, which will make it difficult even if the mayor is thinking practical. How do I get through the policies that need to get done along the way? But it's good. This is a critical choice right now in terms of there. And if I have to weigh, I would say I had to go through. I would say public safety is probably number one. So whoever can really help deliver that is important. Fiscal responsibility is got to be number two, because we can't, if we don't prove that we have that, we're not going to be able to have access to funding or borrowing or anything else along the way in a plan to get there. And then the third is a sense of bringing people together in a diplomatic, way that's not about an ideology, but about the love for our city.
Right. Any chance in the future you'll make a run for?
I'm running for RXR right now. This is what I gotta. I mean, to be honest with you, what I've learned in my short spurts in public life is that there's times when you can do more having one foot in and one foot out than having to have both feet in. If you're an elected official, you have to look at the polls, you have to look at the votes, you have to look at your party, you have all these, your fundraise, you have all these things that become limitations to maybe what is what you might instinctively think is the right thing to get done. And a lot of it is battling a ghost because no one gives you an exact playbook of how everyone feels, right? There's every person you speak can have a different opinion. So so by being out of it but trying to influence what happens, you don't have the weight of all the elements that someone that's an elected official has, but you can influence it. And so I do think it's important for all leaders and at every level, frankly, to focus on how can we be responsible for change and not rely on our elected officials to create that change, because it's going to be up to all of us to do it.
Right. Got it. That's a great answer. I hadn't thought about it that way. So can you tell us about some deals you're working on now at RXR, specifically the Amazon project in Mascot, Queens?
Yeah, so one of the things that as we think through post-COVID, and as we started before, but again, the COVID was an accelerant, was what are the mega trends in when I went to the haves and have-nots? Where are those haves? Where are that demand drivers that are going to drive growth in the New York metro region in companies, and then by companies real estate? And one of them was e-commerce and logistics, and obviously all of us, right, we're all buying everything online, and so the need for having not only logistics but same day type logistics in dense markets like New York have become more paramount to the Amazons of the world. And so we had a site in Mascot, Queens, that we're building a multi-level logistics facility with a partner, LBA, out of California, to where Amazon is leasing that to serve that community. And that's what we believe in. We actually just are also working on another deal in Brooklyn that's similar, another deal in the Bronx that's similar, that we think is going to be makes a lot of sense. I think we'll see some more micro logistics around the city also that will be interesting as people reimagine. The other area that we're focused on is film studios, because we've seen a heavy demand by studios that are looking for content as streaming has become such a big thing, and the talent is here, so they want studios closer to the talent. And then the other area I think that is going to be interesting is healthcare. I think as you're coming out of this pandemic, what's clear is that we as a country have woefully underinvested in our healthcare system.
Yeah.
And when you look at New York, we have some of the best healthcare institutions and scientists and physicians in the world. And so I think that reimagining healthcare, whether that's telecare, virtual care, more of a distributed healthcare model, is going to have a lot of opportunity for real estate to play in that. That's something that we're working on, a couple of transactions like that. And then finally, I think because of this have and have not approach, a lot of real estate is going to become competitively obsolete. And as it becomes competitively obsolete, it's going to be needed to be reimagined, like we did at Pier 57, which you'll see when you guys have your event there, where it takes something that was a 20th century product and figure out how do you make it now function in 21st century. Well, it's the same thing now, but think about that in a post-pandemic world. So whether that's hotels being converted to multifamily, or that's retail being converted to data centers or logistics, I think there's going to be a lot of those opportunities too, and something that we focused on a lot in the past.
Yeah. So much of New York City is dependent upon tourism, and obviously the hotel market has been demolished from that. Do you see it coming back to where it was?
It's interesting, so we're building for JetBlue with the consortium at the JFK at Terminal 6 and Terminal 7, which is obviously on pause right now, but plans to move forward. And so we have the ability to see where what people's views are relative to travel. And I think the general sentiment is that leisure travel and domestic travel is going to come back first, which I think would be farewell for New York, in the sense that if people can't travel overseas and they want to do something fun, New York, when we're back open, is a place that could do well. But New York's going to miss the business traveler, right? Which is, I think people view that as something that's going to take longer and probably only come back maybe to 80% of where it was. which makes sense, right? If you think about, I know of myself where if I was flying across the country, for one meeting, today I would do that by Zoom versus fly across the country for, one meeting. So I think there's going to be more of that for a period of time where that will have to adjust itself.
Yeah.
And then I've had some conversation with colleagues in the hospitality world who are more bullish on international travels accelerating at a much faster pace, right? So I think the basic view of the industry is that by somewhere in 22, beginning or end, not exactly sure, we get back to 19 levels on leisure and domestic travel. And then somewhere in 24, you get back to international travel. So I guess we'll see how it all plays itself out.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of real estate companies that have the dry powder sitting there and they're just waiting to find out, is now the time to jump in? And I think everyone's a little cautious to jump in. How do we get that deal flow going again?
Well, it's interesting because we talk about that a lot, and I reflect back in 2007, we sold our company in January and we raised a fund and we didn't start investing until August of 2009. And and so we went through all of 07, 08, waiting to see where the markets were. And then 09, there was still a fog of uncertainty, but there was enough clarity for insiders that had conviction to make that move. And so, we then went in 09 and were very acquisitive through 2010. I think right now we're in 08. We're not in 09. And I think we're needing more clarity. The fog's got to lift a little bit. I think that's on the investor side, and on the seller side, and then you need some of that to happen to bring prices to a level that makes sense, right? And people have to capitulate. They had this value in mind. Now it's probably here. And they have a situation where there's in some cases their equity may be wiped out, so you need to wait for a lender to take control or them to agree on a sale below what the debt price is, right? So all that takes time.
Yeah.
And so I'd imagine sometime next year we'll start seeing more trades. So we're working on a couple of things that we've seen from March till today. The pricing come in, and people have capitulated to a point where we're hopefully going to execute on it.
Yeah.
And you see more of that in the debt space, you see more of that in the hotel space. Now you got to work around we have the little clock as to from the most distress to the least distress.
Yeah.
We got to keep working around the clock.
Okay. And geographically, you've often invested here in New York. What do you think about expansion?
So one of our advantages is is understanding New York as well as we understand New York, and dealing with the complexity of the New York marketplace and the public-private partnerships that we do, and the tenants that we have and relationships with them. That being said, some of our products like logistics that are maybe a little bit more unique are more transferable. So I think as in our latest fund that we have, we're going to be looking beyond New York in the other metro areas around the Northeast, and whether logistics or infrastructure or healthcare, that are more niche products. So not necessarily to go build a whole new portfolio in another marketplace, but to take those products and the relationships and expertise to other markets.
More driven by what the property is going to do than where it is.
Exactly.
Interesting. Okay.
Should we open up to some questions?
Yeah. Sure. Sounds good.
So we've been receiving a lot of questions. Apologies if we can't get to all of them. One came in about whether the mayor ever responded to the letter that you had signed along with the other 150 business leaders back in early September.
Not directly. The mayor did not respond directly, but there were some things that were done. Like, for example, one of the comments that we had made was sanitation, budget was cut. And so part of the challenge is not only did we have an uptick in homelessness and crime, the streets were filled with garbage. So how do you bring people back to New York when that's what they're coming back to? So they reinstated that as an example. So there was some actions that were taken like that, but nothing formally as a response.
And then you mentioned our next fund and how we may expand that a bit geographically depending on the product type. Can you talk a little bit more about the size of that fund and more about the mega trends that we discussed earlier? and the strategy behind that?
Yeah, so the fund is, our last one was about $1 billion. This one will be about $1 billion. But the way our funds work is that for every dollar in the fund for discretionary capital, we usually have $2 or $3 of what is co-investment or joint venture capital. So as we've raised our funds, and that's part of what the appeal is with our fund investors, is they sort of, the fund investment gets them to seat at the table. And then if there's a specific project that is really compelling for their strategy, they can make a more concentrated investment in that investment. So in this case, we would imagine it'd be similar. So the billion would be, somewhere in the $4 billion type range of capacity. And I think, it would focus on the mega trends that we spoke about, but it's also going to focus on the distress and dislocation that we expect to see in this market, and not just on office, but I think there'll be, a meaningful amount on even multifamily, which we haven't seen in New York, in many cycles. The multifamily has seemed to hold its own, but I think between multifamily, leasing, and, pressure and rent pressure and concession pressure and the tightening of the financing market, we're seeing more deal flow of good projects that can't get refinanced, that need someone to come in to either provide, preferred equity or mezz or become a partner or sell to help recapitalize part of their portfolio. So I think that's something we'll seek to do in this cycle as well.
And can you also touch a little bit more on our diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives and what we're doing to support that?
Yeah, so one of the things that we've been very focused on for a long time, and it's something that, as you mentioned, Drum Major Institute.
I was going to ask you about that,
Drum Major is Martin Luther King III is now, he wasn't the chair, but it was always his father's organization and legacy. And so Martin has actually become the co-chair with his wife and his daughter, who's an extraordinary woman in her own right. And so we've always been very engaged in how do you make our communities better places to live and work, but not just for everyone, but opportunity for everyone. And how do you particularly deal with men and women of color who have come and grew up in places because of how they've grown up or how they've been educated, that they don't have necessarily the opportunities that others have. And so with every one of our projects, whether that's an office building or a development, it's focusing on how can we actually, we say doing good and doing well means doing better, right? How do we actually extract change and use that project as a moment to ignite change and give people opportunities? So, for example, in New Rochelle, we're the master developer. When you look at what we've done in our building, we spend the time training people locally so they have the skills, so that we can then hire them on our projects and show that 60-70% of the people that are working on our projects are from locally, either from New Rochelle or right around New Rochelle. And we work with the local high schools and the local parishers and the civic groups about how do we ultimately get as broad amount of people that are part of that community to have the opportunity to benefit from the developments that we're doing. And then we work with the small businesses so that we start helping them to think about how they reposition their business, so that as new development comes and new customers comes, they don't get gentrified out, but they actually have repositioned it where they can actually benefit now from this new customer mix and thrive from it, right? And so it's an embracing of the community, diversity of the community, and that's and then that character is what we want to make our project special, and view this as a long-term investment in that. And now we're taking it to the next level of trying to think about equity specifically, where can we find minority-owned businesses, or frankly people of color in those communities that we think have the capacity and desire to run businesses and support them financially, so that they can grow and build their own businesses and hire locally and serve as role models for others in their community. And then we have had to fund this, we've had an opportunity zone fund that was a $500 million fund that in each of these cases we tie into that. And then there's obviously mentorships and all these other different programs that we have But to me, it's less of a policy and more a part of our DNA, right? And when people talk about ESG and this, I think to us, it's literally in our business plan how we judge success or not success. And so it's and it's what but frankly, it's what gives us energy about what we do as a company as we work with our communities.
That's great.
And you touched upon this a bit earlier, but we got a few questions about how you view the new normal, especially within the commercial space. Maybe how we view how the future of the office space will
Sure.
work.
Yeah, so it's a good question I should touch upon. So, in this acceleration, right, I view office analogous to what happened to retail, which is good and bad, right? And in retail, it came when e-commerce hit. If people could buy something online, they weren't going to go to a commodity-like store, travel a long distance to go to a mall, unless they were going to get an experience, unless it was an outing, unless it was something that was engaging. And I think it's going to be the same thing for offices, where if you can work online and not have to commute or not have to leave your apartment, then you'll do that, unless going to the workplace is about getting an experience, engaging, about being part of a broader community and support group that you otherwise wouldn't have. You have upward mobility. And so I think what's going to happen is the buildings that can provide that sense of experience and that sense of community and energy of saying, okay, now I'm part of something, part of New York, I feel it, and are well located, easy to get to, either walkable or public transit, are going to thrive. And then within those four walls is going to be much more incumbent upon the landlords and the tenant on activating what happens in those four walls, and making sure that when people are in the workplace, that it's a highly programmed environment to ensure that engagement's happening, to ensure that collaboration's happening, and being able to better monitor, is it working or not working, and adjusting appropriately. And I think there'll be a more dynamic work environment where there'll be 3 or 4 days a week people will work in the office, and then 1 or 2 days a week they'll work on the road or at a satellite office close to home, or work from home remotely. And I think that will enhance the quality of life for people. I think it will help our capacity as a city deal with transit and congestion on our streets. But then to really create the bond of loyalty and the opportunity for the people in the office space, is going to really be about much more of a curated environment than it was in the past. Like, again, malls are a good example, where the ones that are thriving are well located and our experience is curated, and people want to go there for that reason. We need to do the same thing in office space, which means there'll also be a lot that don't do it, and there'll be more obsolescence than there have been in the past.
Right. The bars and restaurants are contingent upon bringing back the office, right? Is go to work, go grab a drink with your
No, there's
your
no doubt.
colleagues.
That's a hard, listen, of the reopening on COVID, right? The bars and the restaurants are the toughest one, because that really has been proven to be where there are super spreader, events, right? And when you look at the statistics, even in whether it's the UK or recently in Canada, whenever they relax that, that's where problems start. So that's really going to be, more incumbent on the vaccine. And frankly, I think you're going to see a situation where we'll almost have certificates for those that are vaccinated to be able to go into, restaurants for a while.
Or antibody testing.
Right. Well, anybody's not yet validated, but maybe it could be. There's in the scientists that we speak to, there hasn't been enough proof yet that antibodies hold long enough to actually, be validated. There's also inconsistency in antibody testing. So some tests say, you have them, some say you don't have them, right? And that hasn't been good. But over time, they're studying that right now, and that may be one of the outcomes.
Do you think we're going to go another lockdown anytime soon?
I don't think so. I hope not. I think we've always said this is not just about the vaccine, right? It's about behavior, which we talked a lot about already.
Yeah.
It's about therapeutics, and it's about testing. And I think that in New York in particular, I think we've generally done a pretty good job on behavior in terms of face mask wearing and being thoughtful and social distancing. and the tools that we talked about. On the therapeutics, science is getting better every day. And so you've watched, even if hospitalization rates have gone up, deaths have gone down dramatically, and the amount of time people are in the hospital has gone down, and people going to the hospital have come out and recovered more quickly. So, and there seems to be good science on that front. And then testing, like we were talking about, you know, the thing that we're even describing, we couldn't have done that 6 months ago, right? Because there wasn't enough testing capacity. Remember, the message was, unless you feel sick, don't get tested. Right now, the message is, you know, programmatically, let's test what we call surveillance testing, so we could try to shine a light on the asymptomatic carriers to protect them and everyone else. And so now we have the testing. So between behavior therapeutics and testing, we should be able to manage, even if we're in a situation where you know, the virus infectious rate climbs a little bit more.
And we're running short on time, so apologies. We couldn't get around to everyone's questions, but I guess the last one is, can you tell us a little bit more about your art behind you, Mr. Brainwash, and
Yeah, so
some of the other pieces?
right, so this is a artist, Mr. Brainwash, who is someone that we've done things with before. He's based out of LA, and I don't know if anyone can see. Can you see the piece here right there? He's right behind Ryan's also another piece. The piece behind Ryan I saw in a gallery before I actually met Mr. Brainwash. But you notice on the top it says RXR, and it says love is the answer. And then I was on the MTA board, has little number 7 subway line and danger and voltage and follow your dreams. So I thought it sort of like reflected it. So I got that. But then when New York was feeling challenged in the heat of COVID, we reached out to Mr. Brainwash and asked him to do some pieces for us, more about New York. And if anyone went by 5 Times Square, or it was on the cover of Commercial Observer, we took all the billboards at 5 Times Square and put inspirational messages and art from Mr. Brainwash along the way. And then one of the ones he did for us was doing good and doing well means doing better, which is our corporate saying and value set. And then about, you know, following your dreams and love is the answer in New York and all these great things.
That's awesome.
So got to try to inspire with artwork.
Right.
Yes. Awesome.
Well, I think that's all we have time for.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. This was very insightful.
My pleasure.
Learned a lot.
I hope everyone enjoys lunch.
Yes, enjoy your home chicken, and hope to see you all in person again soon.
I look
Thanks,
forward to
everyone.
doing this in person with your group. So thank you again for having me.
Great. Thanks.
Be well,
Scott.
everyone. Have a great Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Thank you.